Okay, good evening everyone. Hope you're all well. For those that are new to these sessions, my name's Rich. I'm the head coach and founder of RIAK Fitness. We're a coaching outfit. We do lots of work with Wahoo RGT. And we run all these live sessions that you'll see in the RGT calendar. And this one is our Monday assembly ride. Now, just a quick reminder, you can ride this as hard as easy as you like. It's a nice session to kind of mix it up. We've gone a bit crazy and we're riding stage 2 of the Criterium to Dauphine, the last 30 odd Ks. That was today's stage, I think, and it's just one climb. So don't worry if you're not up for climbing a mountain today. You can turn down your training resistance. So off we go. Yeah, if you need to turn down your training resistance, you just go to the sensor settings in RGT, and you can turn it right down if you want. Right, my advice would be to turn it, if you do want to turn it down at all, turn it right down, and then you can always increase it. And basically what that'll do is just kind of, well, if you put it down to 0, your trainer will simulate a perfectly flat gradient basically, and so obviously you can find something in between that. So as I say, we're riding stage 2 of the Criterium to Dauphine. I haven't actually watched today's stage. I watched the highlights of yesterday's, but I've not been a bit too busy to watch today's stage. So you'll see me in the pack just rolling around at about 2 watts per kilo. Well, eventually once I've warmed up a little bit. I'll just be cruising, and as always with these Monday sessions, we have a particular kind of coaching topic that we're going to be covering, and tonight's we're going to be talking about supplements and whether they're necessary for endurance athletes. Okay, so that's tonight's topic. If anyone has watched today's Criterium, the Dauphine stage, don't tell me the result. I do plan on watching it after this, so please don't take my evening from me. Just a reminder as well, guys, these are intended to be interactive sessions, so various ways that you can kind of get in touch. For those guys that are on Zoom, feel free to unmute yourself at any point and ask any questions. You can also use the Zoom chat feed. There's also the RGT chat feed, which thankfully again I've managed to get working. Often doesn't work for me for some reason. And then finally, for any of those guys watching the live stream on our Facebook page or the various social media channels for V-Cycling news, you guys can leave comments on the live stream and we'll pick those up as well. Keep them clean though. We've had some pretty dodgy stuff come through in the past. Hence why we don't actually show it up on the live stream. Have to filter some of it. People are the worst, aren't they? So as I say, guys, plenty of ways that you can kind of get in touch and ask questions. Don't be afraid. We very much welcome your questions, guys. Does mean that we're kind of imparting the information that you guys really want. One last kind of bit of admin. We also, just following up what I just said, we really want to make sure that we're talking about the stuff that you care about. So guys, please do feel free to send us any requests for topics. We've done actually quite a few sessions that are as a result of requests. So they don't fall on deaf ears. As I say, if it's within kind of our remit, or we have at least a certain amount of knowledge on it, or in certain circumstances we can also get experts in to lead the session if it's a particular topic and we know them and that we can manipulate them into coming to chat to us. We'll get it done. So yeah, please feel free to send us any requests. Either do so, through the various methods that I talked about in terms of interactivity, or feel free to drop us an email. And then likewise, if you've got any questions after the session, you get to think something, or you're perhaps a bit nervous about asking questions. I know some people, perhaps don't like answering questions on a public stage. I know, I have to be honest, when I go, university or whatever, school, I was never one to put my hand up unless I felt it was a safe space. Despite doing all this, actually a little bit shy. Well, am I shy? Or am I just antisocial? I'm probably more antisocial, I'd say. So yeah, guys, plenty of ways to get in touch. Send us your topic requests, and we can get stuff together for you. Otherwise, guys, just sit back, relax if you want to. If you don't want to, we've got a hell of a ride ahead. So it's, as you can see from the topography at the bottom of the screen, it's pretty much just all bloody red. So it's basically, we've got kind of, I'd say like the first 10-15 Ks or should be relatively manageable, and then it's the last 20 Ks which is the main climb. Okay, just thought we'd do something a bit different, and this is normally where I get abuse from certain individuals for picking courses that are too hard. But we just kind of want to mix it up, guys, and as I say, you've got the trainer feedback setting that you can play around with. So I've got it turned right down so I can talk, and so that I can hopefully be somewhat coherent. So tonight's topic then, let me get my notes up. So we're talking about supplements and whether they're necessary for endurance athletes. Now, we're mainly talking sort of your proteins, your multivitamin supplements. You have a little bit on caffeine, So basically, they're kind of the main stuff. I'm not a nutritionist personally, so one of my bits of advice, which I'll get into in a bit, is if you really want kind of in-depth tailored advice, I'll just point you towards a couple of resources. Okay, but answering the kind of the big question in a very short and succinct way: how necessary are supplements for endurance athletes? Well, in general, the typical Western diet is not deficient in macro or micronutrients. So in the broadest of senses, and obviously there's always exceptions, there's always exclusions. In the broadest sense, you shouldn't really need supplements. Your diet should cover most things. Okay? We have easy access to pretty much whatever we want. Okay? Lots of nutrient-dense foods, and that if you're eaten in the right proportions, should cover all of our bases. I'll also go into this in a bit more depth. But for most people, unless they're diagnosed with a particular health condition, they don't really need to supplement their diet. They should be able to get everything they want. Obviously, there's various reasons why they might not be able to. But just as a very, very general rule, the starting point should be getting what you need from your food. Okay? So this isn't going to be us trying to plug supplement partners, etc. Okay? We do have relationships with certain supplements, but yeah, they do have a place, and I will be talking about how they can be useful as well. I'm not just here to talk about why they're not, but just as a very general rule, the starting point should be to get everything you need from your food. And to be frank, it shouldn't be that difficult. Now the problem is the food industry and the supplement industry make things a bit murky sometimes. Okay, and that's really where the confusion comes in, not necessarily anything to do with what's on offer. It's usually the marketing materials around the products themselves that confuses things. Okay, so what we're really talking about is ensuring that you're consuming nutrients in the right quantities and ratios through your food. The only real deficiencies that aren't associated with kind of specific medical conditions as such tend to be iron deficiency, typically in in women with they have a particularly heavy period. That's one example. And then probably the most common, I would say, is most common exclusion to the general rule is vitamin D deficiency. So in Northern Europe in particular, so I'm UK based, we do not get enough vitamin D. And simply because we don't get enough sunlight, we don't get enough sun on our skin. Okay. I'll be going into that in a little bit more depth. Don't worry, that's not just kind of done. Let me just check in something very quickly. Cool, just want to check my headphones are working. They have a habit of turning themselves off. So our chat tonight is pretty high level. If you'd like more expert and tailored advice, I would suggest two things. Okay, firstly, get yourself an athlete-specific blood testing kit. Okay, there's tons of companies out there. We use Fourth Edge, and we can arrange a little bit of a discount if you get in touch. But basically, blood testing is potentially a bit controversial, but getting a blood test through your GP, if you're looking at it from a performance perspective, it's not that useful, because GP blood tests, they're just basically, is this person within a healthy range? And that range is usually very broad. So I'd recommend going with a kind of a blood testing company who specialise in dealing with athletes, because then it's more about, are they in an optimal range? Okay, so say we use Fourth Edge. So that's one kind of resource I'd really recommend if you need more detailed advice. So blood testing is really useful because they'll test kind of key biomarkers, and as I say, figure out whether you're in an optimal range. So it's no longer about whether you need supplements, it becomes more about would supplements put you within an optimal range. Okay, so that's the first one. Second one, and I think I've spoken before about why investing in your nutrition is one of the top investments you can make, but I really consider engaging the support of an expert nutritionist. Now, our recommendation, of course, is our training partners, Total Endurance Nutrition. They've done talks on a Monday with us before, but an outfit like those guys will be able to advise you on a tailored supplement program if it's necessary. Obviously, their starting point is going to be on optimizing kind of your nutritional intake. Okay, and they'll sort you out with food plans, recipes, etc., and just general kind of nutritional advice depending on your training volume and lifestyle. So those, as I say, this is a high level chat tonight. You want more, those two resources are a really good place to start. Blood testing and expert nutritional coaching or consultation. So we are here to talk about supplements though, and I think probably the first one, the one that everybody automatically thinks of, is of course protein shakes. Okay, so always when we bring on new clients, it's so often one of the first things we get asked about: should I be taking protein supplements? And you can probably guess where this is going to start because of the introduction. The answer is, as a general, don't need, and I put emphasis on need, protein shakes. Now, we'll just talk about a little bit what protein is and how it is important, how it can play a role. Protein is, of course, really important for post-session recovery. Endurance training and resistance training both increase muscle protein synthesis, and this is increased in further when you're in a fed state. So if you're going to a session properly fueled, that protein synthesis kind of response is increased. And then protein ingested kind of pretty much immediately after exercise again enhances this muscle protein synthesis response. So eating protein straight after training will enhance your body's kind of production of muscle protein to repair the damage. And it will also, if you're ingesting protein after a session, it will also kind of inhibit muscle breakdown from the damage that you've done during training. So it can result in a positive balance, basically. So what by that I mean, building muscle. So protein ingestion straight after training, always really positive. Okay, wouldn't worry about calories too much, although having a protein shake can be a way of exhibiting control if you're on a calorie controlled diet. But generally speaking, how much? Well, we're talking about, we want to maximize that muscle protein synthesis response. You're looking at about 20 grams of protein. And if you're an older athlete, shall we say, potentially to kind of really maximize that response, you might need up to 40 grams. Okay, so that's just if you're an older athlete, you might need to take on more protein in order to elicit the same response. In terms of our general dietary protein needs, which is a question I often get asked, it's quite a broad range. It really depends on the athlete and their training volume, but you're probably looking at something in the range of 1.2 to 1.7 grams of protein per kg per day. Okay, so that's again a very general rule. You'll be able to get much clearer advice from a nutritionist such as our guys. Now the type of protein is important. You want something with a high leucine content, and that's an amino acid. So most kind of protein shakes, etc., will have a high leucine content because they'll focus around particular types of protein. And then also the rate of metabolism of that protein is important. So whey protein's a really common one, high leucine content, and it's metabolized really quickly. Soy is a good protein, also metabolized pretty quickly. And then casein, which is another common form of protein in protein shakes, that's kind of slightly less quickly metabolized, but again high leucine content and a really good high quality protein. Now I spoke a little bit about timing. Generally you're talking within 2 or 3 hours of exercise, but really you want to be Johnny on the spot with the protein after a training session within an hour. And for women, your muscle protein synthesis response can be quite short-lived. So for women, probably talking within 30 minutes of a session. And you also might want to consider taking branched chain amino acids. If you want to know more about that, there's a great book which I've recommended a couple of times actually. I think I even did so in the last session. There's a book called Raw by Stacey Sims, which gives some really good female specific nutritional advice. But yeah, one of the points from that book is how short the window can be for female athletes. Okay, so it's something to take seriously regardless of your level. Okay, so even if you're not a serious athlete, training 30 hours a week or whatever, you still want to consider that. You still want to make sure you're getting the most out of your training, because if your training is perhaps weight loss focused, making sure you're getting protein after a session is really important, because if your weight loss can be supported by building good lean muscle mass. Okay, so after a session you want to build that muscle, because what will happen is the more lean muscle that you have, the higher your basal metabolic rate, so the higher your metabolism. So recovery is important. Even if you're on a calorie restricted diet, recovery is important. You want that lean muscle, and the best way of getting it is a really high quality training session followed by some high quality protein to kind of maximize the effect of that session, build that lean muscle, and ultimately kind of increase the amount of calories your body burns as a default. Okay, so protein ingestion straight after a session isn't just for serious athletes. It's where, you know, anybody looking to improve their performance, and particularly those that have weight loss goals, want to improve that kind of lean muscle mass. Okay, so just a top tip. Now coming on to protein shakes, they provide a concentrated and quickly metabolized dose of protein and do offer a practical advantage in that they can be processed into a concentrated powder that you can carry around with you, and then you just add water. So it's a really strong argument, I have to say. You know, if I go into a race, you know, I can't necessarily carry all the food, and to be honest with you, after a really intense session and after a race, I really struggle to eat. So protein shake is, for me, can be a really good source of post-recovery nutrition, because I just probably wouldn't eat otherwise. So there is a strong argument there. But and also, sorry, if you're on a calorie restricted diet, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but having a protein shake as opposed to kind of a whole food recovery meal, it is a way for somebody that's on a calorie restricted diet to have a bit more control over the amount of calories going into their body. So yeah, I think a couple of kind of good reasons why protein shakes as a recovery meal do make sense. However, come back to the main question of the evening. We don't need protein shakes. You know, there are so many good alternatives. Now, the majority of non-vegan protein supplements usually use whey protein and/or casein protein, both of which are milk proteins. Okay, both forms therefore are obtained from drinking milk. It's just there in a less kind of concentrated form. And the major downside, in my opinion, to consuming powdered proteins is that they lack nutrient density. You know, by the amount of processing, you strip out all fiber, and you also, because it's just a concentrate, you know, these protein shakes, you typically just got a whey protein and then some sugars to help with absorption. You're missing all kinds of other stuff, which may, you know, you could easily include if you're eating whole foods. So the example we often use is, we often recommend chocolate milk as a recovery snack or recovery meal after a session. That's because it's got both whey and casein protein in it, and it's got lactose sugars, which will help with the metabolism of those proteins, but also will help restock your glycogen stores. So your glycogen stores, guys, they're basically your fuel stores. It's where the glucose that you burn, that's the storage form. Glycogen, it's stored in your muscles and your liver. So after a session, particularly if you're training again that day, you want to restock those glycogen stores as quickly as possible. And that's why it's always great and a good idea to have a high protein meal with some perhaps slightly simple carbohydrates straight after a training session. You want that muscle protein synthesis response, and you want to restock those glycogen supplies. And you're going to get that from something like chocolate milk. Okay? You're also going to get a big hit of micronutrients like calcium is the obvious one. You know, we all know milk is a good source of calcium. You get a protein shake, you're not going to get that in the same quantities, if at all, really. Okay, so really, I think unless you're, apart from the logistical benefit of protein shakes, if you're at home, you know, eating something whole would be probably a lot more beneficial. I think for me, the main instance when sorry, just one quick point before we go on to that. Protein shakes, therefore, I would definitely don't see them as a meal replacement. I know you'll see all kind of adverts, I won't mention brands, for meal replacement. You know, basically, again, that basically means something's been, whatever the food source, the source of the food was, it's been processed to the nth degree, stripped out all the fiber, which means you're going to get a big insulin response when you eat it. So, yeah, I just think protein shakes and the like are just not meal replacement. Eat whole foods, guys. You just get so much for it. You get everything you need to in the right ratios. But to me, the main instance where consuming protein shakes in such a concentrated powdered form is beneficial is when an athlete struggles to meet their protein requirements because of the sheer weight of training volume that they are doing. So our Ironman athletes are quite a good example. You know, some of them doing upwards of 18 hours of training a week. And it's just really difficult, both in terms of just having the time to eat and the sheer quantities, particularly if they're vegetarian or vegan. The sheer quantity, the sheer volume of whole vegetarian protein they have to consume can be insane. So it can just come down to it's just an actual ability to eat enough. And this is where I think protein shakes can become useful. Protein intake is something I personally struggled with at times. I do a lot of these sessions, a lot of the sessions that I do are quite low intensity, like this, so I'm able to talk. And so it's really hard for me to gauge sometimes how much I need. And I've had times where I've been in a heavy training block and I've ended up really craving meat. And I'm largely vegetarian, but not kind of zealous about it. I do eat meat fairly often. But I get cravings with and that tells me my protein level, I'm just not getting enough protein. So it can, protein shakes can have a real beneficial effect, but it's, I think, quite specific context. So I don't think the answer to the question changes, really. Should be able to get your protein levels, and definitely don't have a protein deficiency in the Western world. Okay, so much meat, so I don't think that's really an issue. Okay, but hopefully it just kind of murkies the water, but also clarifies it a little bit as well, hopefully, insofar as protein shakes can have a place, but the context is specific. They're definitely not meal replacements. They should be used for post-session recovery, if at all, really. Okay, so hopefully that will make sense. You usually get a few questions about protein, so I'm just going to pause. If anyone wants to unmute yourselves on Zoom, or hit the Zoom chat or the RGT chat, or hit comments on the live stream, I will just pause for a little bit, just give people a chance to ask any questions. And if anyone wants me to repeat anything as well, I do kind of have to go through it quite quickly. If anyone's got any particular questions or anything I rushed over, do let me know. As I said at the start there, guys, if you're not comfortable asking questions, or you think it's something after the session, always very welcome to drop us an email or drop us a message on social media. So don't feel all is lost. Where are we on the course then? Let's close some of these boxes. So we're basically coming up to the base of the main climb. Okay, so overall it's about 20 k's. It's as you can see, it's a bit of a beast. Let me get the climb up actually. Talk to you a little bit about it. It's not super extreme in terms of gradient. I'll find kind of the main section of it. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, so for the meat of the climb, because I can only get this, kind of, I'd say, I'll use 6 of the climb on the Strava as a segment. Actually, it's not even that. It's like half. Anyway, don't care. You're talking about a 3.6% average gradient, and so it's not huge. It's not huge numbers in here. You know, I'm just scrolling through. You know, there's some 7% sections, but yeah, it's nothing too crazy. Mostly sort of some longer 5% sections, etc. So it's not a super menacing climb, even though there's lots of red sections. It's just long. Okay, so just remember, guys. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, Matt. There is an awful lot of red. But as I say, guys, you can always turn your trainer feedback down. Not sure how to do that. I'll just show you very quickly if I can. You just go to your menu and then to sensors. Oh, no, not that one. Sensors, and this training difficulty at the top right. I've got that turned down to 0 so that I can talk, but just, you can remember, turn that down. The response to Matt's point was not a lot of red, just red. Yeah. Good luck, everyone. This is a proper climb though, so this is, you know, perhaps not as hard as 1-2 or a Stelvio, but it's, you know, it's not far off. Still a 20k climb, and that's never easy. Okay. Anyway, right, let's move on our discussion then, shall we? Where have we got to time-wise? So about halfway through. So for anyone that's new to these sessions, the coaching feed usually lasts about an hour. So I'll probably have to jump off before the end of the course. But guys, just crack on, keep on riding if you want to. Stay for as long or as short as you want. If you get bored, just jump off. But hopefully not when I'm talking, but you know, I won't know. But yeah, just get what you want out of it, basically, guys. You don't have to smash yourself to pieces if you don't want to. Equally, if you want to drive it on and get a 20k climb in your legs, go nuts. We have got the rubber banding effect on, which will mostly keep everyone together. But I often find myself at the back. Right then, so let's move on. So we talked about protein. Next topic, we're going to just talk about yeah, sure, Matt. I'll answer that question at the end if that's okay. Just a question about times. Actually, I'll tell you what, I'll answer that now before we move on. So the question was about our Wednesday sessions. So for anybody watching this on demand, you can ignore probably the next 30 seconds. But for those guys that come to our Monday and Wednesday sessions, our Wednesday sessions, guys, because we moved into the summer, and the numbers of Northern Hemisphere riders has dropped significantly. We, along with quite a lot of other people, to be honest, have decided to try and see if we can pick up some of the Southern Hemisphere crew. So what that means really, guys, is we're now running 2 sessions on a Wednesday, running a 9:30 a.m. BST session, which has the live coaching feed. Okay, the morning session has the live coaching feed. However, for the evening session, which is the exact same workout, there isn't a coaching feed, it's not live, but what you can do, guys, is you head to our Facebook page, the live stream from the morning will be there. So you can just basically get the live feed, get the feed lined up with your workout, and you can just follow it through as if you're joining the live session. Okay, guys, so you can still access the coaching feed from our Facebook page. It just won't be live. Okay, that's if you're joining the evening session. The morning session on the Wednesday though does have a live coaching feed. Okay, so there you go. Okay, so moving on back onto our topic, we talked about protein. We're going to talk now about vitamin and mineral supplements, which is usually the other kind of key area that people are interested in. And this is where things can get really quite complicated. And to be honest, if you're concerned about whether you have a micronutrient deficit, so micronutrients is vitamins and minerals basically. If you're worried about deficiency, really suggest getting a blood test and then some expert advice if you have a particular concern, that is. So if you're worried about having a significant vitamin D deficiency, for example, only way you can know that is through a blood test, and that's not just a plug, that's just the reality. Okay, but one thing you guys might not realise, and I didn't realise this until I started on my coaching / personal training journey. One thing you might not realise is that certain minerals actually compete for absorption. So if you're taking a particular mineral supplement, they tend to come in quite high dosages, and so you might be unwittingly preventing optimal absorption of another nutrient, another mineral. Okay, so unless you have a particular health condition or been diagnosed and advised about a particular deficiency, you should be able to get all your micronutrients, all your vitamins and minerals from your food. Okay, so I know a lot of people take multivitamins and they might be worried about stopping taking them. And that's totally fair enough. Get advice, okay? Get nutritional advice about what you need, and it's really worth the investment, guys, I promise you. Because let's face it, your food is your fuel. Your food just dictates so much about you. Not even regardless of performance, just your health. Food is so important. But I'd suggest, the average level of knowledge around nutrition is very low, and that's not a criticism. That's just because we just don't get taught this stuff. I won't go on to a rant about the ridiculous nature of the British education system and the things that we do and don't learn, because that is a whole session in itself, and I think nobody would watch that. But the only way you can kind of really optimize this stuff is by gaining knowledge and talking to experts. So really worth the investment, I promise you. Knowing more about nutrition is not something you're going to look back on and say wasn't worth it, or I regret doing that. It's kind of one of those, to my mind anyway, best investments you can make, really. So I was looking for a different phrase, but the old mind's gone blank. Anyway, moving back to vitamins and minerals, unless, as I say, you've got a particular health condition or been diagnosed with a particular deficiency, you should be able to get everything you need from your food. And the best bit is that actually when you eat whole foods, you're going to get them in the right ratios. And I think that's something that isn't made enough of. It's like, and particularly when it comes to a performance perspective, everything's in the right ratios for you if you consume the right foods. I always think, like, when it comes to supplementation, if you're trying to balance out your potions, And it seems really unnecessary, really, when you can just get a bit of advice about your eating, make sure you're eating the right things, and you're getting everything, and it'll be a hell of a lot tastier as well. So I think that's a really key point. Your food will contain micronutrients in kind of optimal levels that you can actually absorb. Okay, the main exceptions that we kind of already talked about when it comes to micronutrients are iron and vitamin D. Now, vitamin D is actually a hormone. I'm not going to comment too much on iron deficiencies because it's a medical field basically, and not something I'm super knowledgeable about. But it's over supplementation of iron can have serious consequences, so you definitely need proper advice if you feel that you have an iron deficiency, and usually that can manifest itself if you do have a deficiency in kind of low energy, weight loss, etc. So really make sure you're on top of that or just go see your GP basically. But to understand your iron levels, ultimately it's going to be a blood test again. Okay. But when it comes to vitamin D, it's a pretty common deficiency, particularly in Northern Europe during the winter. Okay, so vitamin D can be obtained from food sources, but the majority is produced within the body as a result of exposure to sunlight. Okay, exposing your skin to sunlight, and we simply don't get out enough. Again, not a criticism as such, it's just a fact, myself included. You know, I do this for a living. Well, not just this, but a big part of what I do is these types of sessions. And so it makes so important that you get outside, get some sunlight on your skin, because not only for vitamin D, as I say, is a hormone, but other hormones. Okay, your circadian rhythm, your sleep patterns, is dictated by the production of certain hormones. And if you don't get out enough, don't get any sunlight on your skin, your body has no idea what to do, and so you can effectively give yourself jet lag. And of course, vitamin D is important for bone health and your immune system. So quite often when people are getting ill a lot, they often discover that potentially, amongst other things, they have a vitamin D deficiency. So, you know, that's why Northern Europeans, kind of our ancestry, you know, we've got this pasty white pigmentation, and that's simply to try and get as much sort of sunlight and vitamin D as possible. Okay. Yeah, just one last quick tip on vitamin D. So some vitamins and minerals are fat soluble. They can only kind of be ingested if they're immersed in fat. So if you are going to take a vitamin D supplement in the winter, I would really recommend take it in a capsule form, where the vitamin D is immersed in olive oil. Okay, so that oil's a fat. So yeah, really recommend that, guys. It might just improve the amount that's actually absorbed. Okay, there's one top tip. Next one, question I always often get asked by cyclists and triathletes is about salt supplements. Now, I have a particular view on this, and I know other coaches and even kind of nutritional experts disagree on this. But from my reading and from all the kind of research that I've read, we care way too much about salt. Sodium is obviously a very key electrolyte, but we tend to get obsessed about salt. Okay, and that's sodium chloride. That's not sodium. All right. Obviously, there's big sodium content, but it's important to, I think, when you're considering all this, just to go back to GCSE biology, or high school biology if you're not from the UK, and just remember osmosis and how salt can either help or hinder hydration. So just a quick little high school or secondary school or whatever you called it recap, osmosis is basically the diffusion of a solvent, which is in this instance water. Diffusion of solvent molecules through a selectively permeable membrane from a region of high water potential to a region of low water potential. So what that translates as is where there's a high salt concentration, water will flow across the membrane to dilute that salt. Okay, and context that this can happen in, which is negative, is if that is your GI tract, that's your gut. So basically you ingest a whole load of salt in the form of a salt tablet or something, what you'll get is water rushing across your gut to dilute the salt rather than pumping up your blood plasma, which is the fluid element of your blood. So salt supplementation in events in hot environments is not a simple yes or no. Just because you're a salty sweater doesn't mean you need salt supplements. Okay, and just remember my point I was saying, like, you should be able to get everything from your nutrition. So your food will contain plenty of sodium, and you know, you can always, if you do actually need kind of increased sodium levels, you know, you can put sea salt in your homemade oat bars or whatever, and they will actually increase your desire for them, which can be a problem in long distance events you just don't want to eat. So a little bit of extra salt can actually help you kind of actually desire it. But salt requirements are incredibly individual, and so again, the best advice is get expert help. You can get tested for your hydration requirements. There is actually like a sweat test you can do, which can better inform you and inform you of your salt needs. But generally, again, you don't need salt tablets. You should be able to get all your electrolytes from your food you consume. You know, as an example, if you look at energy gels, not that they're a great example of a well-balanced food, but energy gels typically contain significant amounts of electrolytes. So do kind of hydration drinks and energy drinks. They tend to have quite a lot of electrolytes in them. Okay, so it's unlikely, in my opinion, my lowly, I would say, potentially uninformed to a certain extent opinion, you're not going to need salt tablets, or if you do, you'll be more of an outlier than a norm. Okay, so that's just a quick FYI. So we talked there about vitamins and minerals, we talked about salt supplements, and again, the overwhelming advice is you should be able to get everything you need from your food. And actually getting it from your food shouldn't be that difficult. Okay, it's just about having a well-balanced diet, the complex carbohydrates in the form of your brown rice, wholemeal, whole wheat pasta, wholemeal breads, you know, those high fiber carbohydrates, your lean protein, you know, perhaps, you know, cutting down on the meat a little bit, and more vegetarian proteins, but that's more for kind of environmental reasons. But you know, lean protein in, you know, hopefully a complete form. So combining your vegetarian proteins, or you know, meat is a good source of complete protein, as is soya, and then plenty of fruit and veg. You know, if you've got fruit and veg with every meal, you can't go wrong, you know. So a piece of fruit is your dessert after lunch, job done. You know, it's really quite straightforward, guys. And again, get plenty of electrolytes from your fruit as well, and lots of fiber. And fiber is super important. We will often probably do a talk about fiber on its own, but fiber, guys, if you're not aware, there's different types of fiber, but just kind of in a nutshell, it helps push food through your digestion, as a very kind of simple way of explaining it. So it's basically the conveyor belt that pushes things along. If you don't get enough fiber, you can become congested, for want of a better phrase, but probably more importantly, if things aren't moving properly, you're not going to have a healthy gut. And if your gut isn't kind of working optimally, it actually means you're not going to get as much out of your food as you otherwise could. So fiber is super important. Okay, so stay away from super processed foods, because anything that's kind of pounded and smashed into smithereens is going to have no fiber, and as I say, it's not going to help the train keep on moving. So I'm just going to pause now, maybe to get a drink and catch my breath. Where have we gotten to? Not so much further than when we lost. Yeah, we're on to the beefy red section. So I imagine not going to get too many questions right now, but if anybody does have any from what we've spoken about so far, do hit me. Unmute yourself in Zoom, use the Zoom chat, RGT chat, or leave a comment on the live stream. I'm just going to have a quick little pause. What's that? Let's get some water. Okay, here we are then. On to the main climb. Just take it steady, guys. So I've got about 10 minutes till I duck off. Got one last thing to talk about. That's caffeine. Okay, I guess not necessarily something you think about as a supplement, but it is a performing enhancing supplement, yeah, performance enhancing drug, effectively, and the performance benefits of it are well known. You know, it's amazing. I love coffee. Can easily change the outcome of a session or a race as to how you're feeling before it, at least. But again, definitely not something we need. Though you can have, it's not something we need, and it can have some pretty negative results, which I just kind of want to signpost. So, for instance, caffeine is a stimulant that increases gut motility, or basically the contractions of the muscles in your intestines that propel contents down the line to the GI tract. So it basically is going to make you need the loo. Okay, so timing is everything when it comes to caffeine, and I do a lot of triathlons, a lot of bike racing as well, but mostly triathlon, particularly kind of, I'd say, long course triathlon, so half Ironman, Ironman, and oh man, the amount of people I see pumping caffeine gels, and I'm just like, no, it's just in the middle of a long course race like that, caffeine gel, oh man, you are in trouble. And I do not understand why they hand them out. Or if they do, they should quickly have a disclaimer, shout a disclaimer at you as they give it to you, because yeah, it's going to make you need the loo. And if you're not near the finish line, it's going to interrupt your event. So you have to be super careful with the timing, and only use it when you're within sort of finishing, within striking distance of the finish line. Okay, I've got it wrong myself. I'm not going to go into details. I've gotten it wrong, and I learned the lesson very quickly. So it can be super effective, can also be dangerous. And how effective caffeine is can depend on how sensitive you are to it. So if you pound the coffee on the regular, you perhaps might not get the effect that you could otherwise if you dropped your caffeine intake a little bit. So you used it as a strategic resource rather than just something you smash sort of 3-4 cups of a day. Okay, using it more strategic. I don't just mean in terms of your training, I mean in terms of your work as well. Using it before, when you need to focus, rather than kind of every hour or whatever. Okay, it can be very useful in terms of kind of helping you be attentive. And so I used to be a lawyer, and I can tell you I was very strategic. The downside was I had to be strategic a lot because it was boring. It wasn't boring. Some of the stuff I had to read could be very boring, and if you needed to retain information, I needed caffeine. But as I say, it can get to a point where you're just smashing it all the time. So you do have to be careful with it. And something you have to be careful with is the fact that caffeine has a half-life of about 6 hours. So it takes about 6 hours until it's properly out of your system. So you don't want to drink too much kind of beyond about 2 p.m. Otherwise it's going to start to affect your sleep. And I've got friends who will have a cup of tea before bed and things like that, and they'll still sleep, but the quality of their sleep is something that might leave something to be desired. Okay, so not all sleep is created equal, and caffeine can really affect the quality of that sleep. Okay, and there's a couple of other things you might not necessarily think about. Something I've noticed, so I've for various reasons dropped the amount of caffeine that I consume, and so when I do have a strong coffee, I do notice, and something that I've not noticed before, obviously knew that this is a thing, but my anxiety levels go through the roof sometimes when I have caffeine, and it can be really hard to acknowledge that when you're feeling kind of hypersensitive and anxious and worried about stuff, that's triggered by the coffee you had 20 minutes earlier. It can be, you can end up having ridiculous arguments because you are just jacked up on coffee. So I think that's something to generally really kind of consider. If you're feeling anxious, do have a quick think about what you've consumed in the time leading up to it. Because I think if you realise, actually, I had a really strong coffee, that might be the cause. It can actually help with that anxiety. It can kind of just help you kind of rationalise things a little bit. I'm not saying it definitely will, but it can. And I personally have found that it can help. I'm just like, the reason I'm rushing around, like banging my head against the wall, like, is because I just had a really strong coffee and I'm not really used to it anymore. And then just finally on caffeine, supplements, coming back to the topic, they can have insane quantities of caffeine in them. I won't mention any brands, but and I think this kind of just emphasises how much of a geek I am, but I wanted to know, kind of, when I was going through dropping my caffeine levels, what was in some of the supplements that I've taken in the past. I compared the amount of caffeine that's in cold brew. So one of our partners, 80/20, they do a fantastic cold brew, and cold brew is pretty strong. It's got a lot of caffeine in it, but it's a natural form of caffeine, and so it's not kind of super processed, super jacked up, kind of instantly into your bloodstream kind of caffeine, although it's pretty strong. And I compared that with the amount of caffeine that was in a particular brand of energy gels. How people don't just have an immediate heart attack after taking this brand, I do not know. It was insane. It's just like, I couldn't believe it. So yeah, if you do use kind of supplements that contain caffeine, check how much is in it and compare it to kind of ordinary everyday sources of caffeine, because it can be shocking. And if you think, going back to the point I made earlier about caffeine kind of stimulating gut motility, the more caffeine you got, the more stimulation. So I think I'll just end that one there. So there you go, guys. We talked about a number of different things tonight. We're just coming up towards the hour, but I'll just do a quick little summary. So we started off talking about protein supplements. Don't need them. There are contexts in which they can be incredibly useful. I think initial advice would be to try and get everything you need, your protein in particular, from whole foods. And then if you perhaps have a really high training volume, only then really start to think about kind of protein shakes. But as I say, guys, you should be able to get your protein from whole foods, but whatever you do, make sure you get your protein in after a solid training session. You really want to maximize that protein muscle synthesis response, okay, regardless of your aims. So remember, if you're have weight loss gains, still important. Even if you're on a calorie restricted diet, you still need that protein, because it's going to help build that muscle and help raise your basal metabolic rate, the amount of calories you burn as a default. We then talked about vitamins and minerals. Again, the message there was you should be able to get everything from your food, unless you've got a particular health condition. And then if you are concerned at all, if you are getting ill a lot and you think it might be because you're lacking in something, get yourself a blood test and get some good advice. Okay. And I mentioned quickly about vitamin D. Get sunlight in your skin. Okay. Also mentioned salt supplements. General rule there is, again, not really necessary. Should be able to get electrolytes from your food, and it can have an effect on your hydration, a negative effect on your hydration. Okay, that osmosis chat. And then just finally, we talked a little bit about caffeine and how it has well-known performance benefits, but also can have some very troublesome downsides as well if you haven't timed it properly. So that's just a very quick summary of what we talked about, guys. Just gonna have, so we've got some questions coming through. Great. Time of day have a bearing on food? When is too late? That's a really interesting question. The time of your food. So just thinking how much time I've got to cover this, because this is a really good question. This is actually something we have spent entire sessions on, really, or at least part of sessions. But basically, guys, when it comes to timing of food, there's a couple of kind of complementary but different ways you can think about it. So the way I think about it is break it up into kind of two themes. First one is your general healthy eating. So that's usually surrounds the 3 main meals of the day. And then I think the advice there is pretty simple: lean protein, complex carbohydrates, some fruit and veg. Can't go too wrong with that. Obviously, we could go into more depth in terms of portion size, etc. But at time, really. So your general healthy eating, your 3 main meals, and then your fueling, and that comes towards your snacking and things. So eating between meals, and really there's 2 kind of goals with that. Firstly, if you're snacking between meals on something, nothing massive, some protein with some complex carbohydrate, again, a few hundred calories, what that's going to do is that's going to help stabilize your glucose levels. So what happens is, guys, if you have big calorie rich meals and big gaps in between them, basically you get these big peaks and troughs in your glucose levels. So if you eat something high calorie, your glucose levels spike and your insulin levels will spike to bring them back down. But they don't just bring them back to some nice baseline, it's boom, boom. Okay, so one of the messages we give our athletes is about kind of bridging between meals and just helping to keep those blood glucose levels as kind of steady as possible, and that in turn will keep your insulin levels kind of more measured. And that's important if you've got weight loss goals, because if you're getting these big peaks and troughs in your glucose levels, when your insulin levels spike in response, they'll push glucose into your fat tissue, okay, preparing for that slump. So it's just one thing to be aware of. So the time of day is important, particularly when it comes to training. So you really want something in your system, you know, a couple of hours before a session to make sure your session is properly fueled. When you're training, it kind of dictates as to when you eat. But of course, I've said on previous sessions, if you struggle to eat kind of in advance of a session, making sure that your glucose levels are topped up is most important, so you have a high quality training session. So if you have to, you're doing something a bit more sugary in the hour before a session just to make sure you've got fuel to burn is more important than worrying about the calories. You will not, if you're eating it just before a hard session, it will not, we're talking back to those insulin response, your insulin won't have time to kind of respond and push glucose into your fat tissue, because you'll just be burning it straight away. Okay, and then the final question, when is too late? Really hard one to answer, because there can be a big kind of cultural element to it. So obviously in the UK we tend to eat a bit earlier than perhaps our Mediterranean colleagues. Yeah, I'm not sure I have a kind of a particularly useful answer on that one. I think you definitely want to try not to eat too soon before you go to bed. And carbohydrate in particular, you don't necessarily want a really heavy carbohydrate meal just before you go to bed. Okay, try and remember back to my personal training education as the science behind that. I can't quite remember off the top of my head the reason for that. Just give me 1 second. So I'll just look blankly at the camera and people can think that the sound's not working. I'll tell you what, rather than kind of wasting everyone's time, I'll make a note of that one and I'll come back to you about that one next week, if that's okay. If you've got any other questions, please do feel free to hit me, guys. Otherwise, we've got about 9k's left of the climb. We're just about to come over the crest of the really hard section, and that I will take as my signing off moment. But yeah, Steve, I'll come back to you on that question. That's a really good question about timing of food. Hopefully I've covered most of the question, but the final one about when is too late, yeah, I'll come back to you on that one, because I feel there is a better answer there for you than I'm able to give immediately, but I'll pick that up on the next session. Okay, anyone got any easier questions? No worries, Steve. Thanks for the question, mate. Just a quick reminder, guys, that if you've got questions after the session, do feel free to email us or message on social media. We are always keen on topics for the sessions. Obviously, going to pick up Steve's question next week. But if there are any particular topics you'd like us to talk about, please do email us or message us on social media. We do just want to make sure that we're basically talking about stuff you find interesting. So please feel free to hit us. But otherwise, guys, you have yourself a great rest of the day. And if you're staying on RGT, enjoy the rest of the climb. Hopefully it should ease off a little bit now. But yeah, thanks everyone. Cheers for your company. Well done.